Setting up, sharing the screen, slideshow. Can you hear me? My sound is muted, so I think it should work. My name is on the schedule. It's partially co-presented with Jérémie Hornus, co-founder of Black Foundry in Paris. By now, long-time collaborator, right? Mm-hmm. I've been working with and for Black Foundry for about 2 years, maybe.
Yeah.
And since the context of this this project comes from projects from within Black Foundry, Jérémie will introduce where it's coming from.
Yep.
So Jérémie Hornus.
So I'll make a quick introduction. Fontra, Joost will present a bit later. Before Fontra, we worked on a project called RoboCGK. That is actually open source and you can find on GitHub. That was made for large-scale CGK typeface design and development. And based on the idea of variable components. So for Hanzi is the Chinese script, uses a lot of repeating components, but they are very variable. So we took the idea of the variability that you can find in variable fonts, but at the level of the Glyph, which is similar to what you can see in Smart component for the Glyph app. But since we use RoboFont, we brought that up into RoboFont through an extension called RoboCGK. It's also using a remote MySQL database to enable collaborative work by a large team of designers and worldwide, basically. So some are in Paris, others in China, and so on. Then we came with some limitation in this extension for RoboFont, and we decided to make a new tool, and that's where Joost arrived and started to develop this new tool that would enable us to work on variable font style family from the beginning. So instead of having single UFO for different weights or different styles, we have everything merged. And even at the Glyph level, the Glyphs are variable. And we needed also the performance, so fast performance, because you cannot afford just to keep waiting when you're designing.
Well, you have to know for CGK fonts, the number of glyphs in a font is in the tens of thousands, right? So it's the scale is quite uncommon. If you've never worked with that, it's quite a different ballpark than your average Latin design.
So you cannot keep them in one UFO and just wait for the UFO to load in 10 minutes or so. And also we need, because so many glyphs, we need many designers to design them simultaneously. And another thing that's nice to have, it would of course need to be not tied to macOS. So this new tool is actually the basis for a new RoboCGK, kind of, because we don't use, it's not an extension for RoboFont anymore. It's a proper font editor that has the viability, the variable font at its core, that is a real font editing platform, extensible, cross-platform, and scalable for large projects. So this would be the new base for RoboCGK and for making CGK typefaces, but not only, hopefully.
Yeah.
So I think Joost can.
Wait, I might have clicked now the wrong thing. I was trying to. Yeah, I think we're ready to. Thank you for the. So this is the context in which this new project is developing. It's kind of we are kind of for the first time publicly talking about it. It's not officially an announcement because it's not ready, nor will it ever be. But okay, we're going to focus on the things that it can do, of course. So anyway, Fontra was a name chosen by Fabio, the Italian web developer working for Black Foundry. He somehow came with this Italian sounding thing, and somehow it stuck. It was just a quick idea. Anyway. Under construction. technical overview. So we chose to build the UI to run in a browser and to have a client-server model. So it's a hybrid application. It's not only in the browser we need at the moment. We need a server application, and then the browser will talk to that server. Multiple clients, single server. There's communication. I'm not sure how deep I want to go into the details. I think we should probably focus on the more design-oriented aspects and not so much or there can be questions. We can have a discussion later on, or more specific questions. I prepared one slide about why we chose the browser-based UI. There's some really good things speaking for it. Well, browsers run on all the major platforms. HTML5 canvas is actually very good and fast, and it's pretty well suited to build these kinds of interactive 2D environments. JavaScript is, I've always been able to more or less read JavaScript. I'm mostly a Python developer, but I'm now for a bit more than half a year been immersed in this JavaScript world, and it's very easy to learn. I mean, especially with coming from Python, the more I understand the differences, the more I appreciate each for what they are. And it's actually been a lot of fun. So of course, JavaScript. I mean, the community around, well, the sheer number of people who are web developers or are fluent with that kind of technology is just a very appealing kind of situation. There's of course also some cons, like it's not desktop. Web browsers do not have direct access to the file system. So if you want to edit a file on disk with your web browser, that's not really possible. I mean, you can kind of upload a file to your browser, and then the browser can work with that, and you can. So, but it can't really read a file system like how a regular application can do that. So, web applications are a little special in that sense. And yeah, whatever UI you come up with, I mean, anything goes. So it's almost inherently non-native to the hosting platform. On the other hand, I actually found that quite liberating to more start to think in really like a web application kind of mindset, and not like, what is the desktop application, and now we're gonna pretend to make a desktop application that runs in a browser. So to really kind of embrace this different world. Anyway, very roughly, quite technical, but the block diagram, it's a hybrid application. So we have a big component is running in the browser. There's a server component, and the server is divided in several components. We separate kind of the so-called the backends that can deal with different output formats, and we can that server can talk to the file system, but it can also talk to a database or other things. We'll come to some examples and demos in that direction. Where we started, core concepts, well, variable first. Again, as Jérémie explained, this project comes from problems encountered in real projects. So whatever we made this application to become, that is, ouch. It's a bottle beer. That was remarkably quiet for a broken bottle. Anyway, so the kind of things that we're building kind of are coming from these actual projects, and that also kind of something you will see later, like, hey, it can do this, but why can it yet do that? Well, that is kind of because we don't need those things as urgently as anyway. So there's, it's a way bigger project than we want it to be. So we really have to focus on that, what is realistic. Anyway, so the variable fonts are important. Variable components is a very important concept, as Jérémie explained. So pretty much a glyph, to repeat, has its own little design space that can be instantiated as a component anywhere else. So if you work with glyphs, the smart components concept is more or less equivalent. In the future, we also want to deal with nonlinear interpolation, also called HOI by the people who like that name. Disconnected? Is there a connection problem? Oh, that one. But is Zoom all right?
It looks like, yeah.
Okay. Should we move a bit to the right so this screen is better visible? We have something.
connecting.
Oh, it's connected. It's coming back, you think? Ah, there it is. Yeah. Okay, so slide. So hybrid, yeah. So it's partially written in JavaScript, partially in Python, and design is done with HTML and CSS as well as code. So that is it's a mixed bag of stuff. Is there? Well, you know, there's. I will not spend too much time here. When? How? Yeah, it will be open sourced. Most likely as GPL3, so that's somewhat restrictive in terms of how freely you can use that code in other contexts. We plan to open the GitHub repository in September. The initial audience, I mean, you will, if you want to play with it, you are gonna have to fiddle. So initially, it's not yet going to be. Yes, question? No question. What? Disconnected. Yeah, but is that? But is it just the screen that is a problem, or is it?
It's only this screen.
So it's the remote audience is not affected. Okay, so we can ignore the. It's just sorry. The slides are also yeah. It's my. Anyway, so it will be a while before it will be a more friendly thing that it can be bundled as an easier download. For instance, I mean, we'll come back about the possibilities. It will be doubtless full of bugs. This is a quote I found somewhere that I think will, you know, any new project will. Let's be honest about this. Is not going to be perfect, and to keep it positive, the feature set will keep on growing. By which we mean it's not done. And it's already demo time. Okay, so I'm very confused by all the additional things that Zoom puts on my screen. So I will. Okay, so here we have you know, there's all kinds of. Can I get rid of? This is small. Sorry, I'm getting rid of Zoom stuff on my screen. I made the server application look to a certain folder, and we can choose, for instance, a design space file. And now we are in a page and we see nothing. We have to either choose a glyph or type something. So we can start typing low. Oh, this is already a messed up glyph. Sorry, this is low TypeLab. This is locally. Yeah. This is. I'm looking on a set of UFOs at Typographics NYC. Anyway, so we're a bit of text. You can zoom in and out, so we can type, but select things. It has beginnings of some. Yeah, where to start? So we start. Okay, right. This is the first thing to do. So we're looking at a design space file. So it's the source of a variable font, and we see here a compact representation of the axes that are live. So we're not actually we're looking at source data, right? This is not a binary font that is loaded into the browser. We're really looking at outlines that we can and we can determine the place in design space where we're looking at, and we can, for instance, double click on a glyph and we can zoom in and we actually see the handles. And let's go to an actual source. And there is an editor that works.
Wow.
There's some undo working. There's a hand tool to move around. Well, we can also, like the track. I'm fully using my trackpad all the time for zooming and scrolling. So but I know there are many people who work with mice and other input devices, and so we have also more or less classical zoom in and out. And well, you know, that was a funny thing. At some point, let's make this thing in a browser. Where do we orient in terms of what should an UI look like? And I realized that a thing like Google Maps is a great kind of application that is intuitive to navigate. Why not use those kind of ideas to look as a font editor? So that's so you see some things that we're almost literally stole from Google Maps in terms of how you can, well, okay, if you lost, if you lost your way, where's my location? Okay, here we are. So let's see, there's beginnings of an info thing. There's actually more for the variable components. I think I should actually move on to a variable component demo. Yeah, that will come. I will speak a bit more about that, but I will show you this. Like window, same font. And so we're talking to a local a little web server thing that's running on my computer, but those two different browser windows are connected through that server. So it's really it's part of the same thing. It's like here. And that goes both ways. And right now I'm demoing in Chrome. I mean, that's my most common environment, but it should work in any browser. We occasionally we test in Safari as well, and occasionally in Firefox. It's not our intention to stick to Chrome, to make that clear. So it should just be a general browser thing. In terms of technology, for instance, I'm originally not a web developer. I somehow accidentally am becoming one now, it feels, which is hurts less than I feared. So it's actually been a lot of fun, but I'm learning a lot. But the cool thing about learning it now, like JavaScript has evolved a lot over the past how many decades? Almost 3 decades, maybe 2.5 at least. And more recent developments are pretty great, and especially if you're coming from Python, there's all kind of newer features that make it that really make it quite a mature language. I mean, there's still many things if you're coming from Python that you think make you go, huh? But it's you can learn that. It's in some ways it's more low level than Python. But I was going to make a point with this.
It's super fast.
It's it's very fast. I mean, so we're zooming in here. So we can have more text than this and those sliders. I mean, we're really interpolating live from outline data, and it's I don't know how fast it comes across in Zoom. That's probably there's probably some lag and some chopping of the frame rate, but on my screen it's pretty fluid. So yeah, these things are just there's browsers have evolved so fast, and there's been so much money put into browsers by big companies. They're really optimized to extreme extents. So JavaScript is really extremely fast. The drawing environment, so we're using a HTML canvas here. That's just a place where you can draw stuff, and it's what you can do there. All right, so we can actually also go to a different location in design space. Let's see if I can just go slightly off where I started here with thin and go a little bit in this, or maybe okay, yeah, a little bit to a different weight. Let's go to that age in the light. If I edit it here, you kind of see the effects in the, so I'm not at the same location even in the other screen, right? I mean, I can also just not be in edit mode there, and you can kind of see live what a change, what kind of effects it has in another part of the design space. Both in the room and by selecting the questions to respond to. So that is looking at
Arrow keys also are working for moving the.
Yeah. Okay. So there's some, there's plenty of things that are not working, but arrow key editing is one of the things that is working. But I wanted to show the variable components. Maybe I should just go to our internal collaboration sites, right? So I'm going to switch over to, so this is the URL that you see on screen is not a public URL. I mean, you can go there, but there will be a login thing and you will not have access. So this is kind of an internal site for Black Foundry. And this is initially just a testing site where we have like an online version of Fontra. Like before, the demo until now was talking to a local server process on my computer here, but now we're looking at a Fontra instance that is running on a server, and it's actually also talking to that MySQL database that Black Foundry already is using before Fontra with the RoboCGK extension. So we're now, for instance, looking at a Kana glyph set for a certain Google Fonts project. So we're looking at there's some special CGK helper tools like this so-called design frame that is useful for those things. But I didn't want to go to the Kana project. Look, I'm using the back button of my browser. It's well. Come to so here is this is like the largest sub project here that is Hanzi, the Chinese script. So these are all those characters are made out of components. So if I go into edit mode, these are components, but they're not regular components. They're variable components, and well, we still have in this particular font there's a weight axis and there's an optical size axis that does things. Let's stick to the regular weight for now, but let's have a look at the information. So now we see I've selected this particular component. Well, you can click onto the other one, or well, let's do this one because it's relatively simple. We see here all the parameters. Well, there's some transformation possible, like with components in RoboFont, you can rotate and scale. There's some details where it's slightly different, but here we see all the axes that the base character defines. So it's the design space really for this particular character, and we can fine-tune the details. So this pretty much how this design works is that a lot of characters have been built in a very parametric way. So there's a bunch, I mean, the Chinese character sets are huge, and there's a much smaller set of more or less common characters. Please interrupt, Jérémie, if I'm not explaining.
About 300, yeah, about 300 elements that are repeating.
So, but they're repeating in slight, often with small variations, and they're sometimes in different sizes. So you will have to be able to tweak proportions, but sometimes details and contrast. Yeah, this is apparently an axis. This is probably for the optical size stuff. Anyway, so again, to repeat, this concept is very similar to smart components in glyphs. So it's not that it's particularly new or innovative, but it's super useful in this context to aid the design process, right? I mean, it's so there's a question from. No, the parameter names are that's a whole different story. Can you say something?
Yeah, we have a page where it's explained. We created a nomenclature about the changes. So, for example, BL means bottom left, P is pied, it's the pied, and then
How does it know that
it's doing it by the name.
It's literally a design. It's literally a variable font with just one glyph, right? So it's a complete design space, but local to a single glyph. So these axes only exist for this particular. Well, not. I mean the base glyph. So, for instance, if I want to go to the actual character, I can double click on this one, and we go out of edit mode, and it will insert the character that's based on. And initially, we're now viewing this character, and now we see in viewing mode those same parameters, but now we're just viewing, so we cannot. We would have, so it has, you see here, it has a whole bunch of masters, this character, and actually this one is made again of components. So what in this particular project, there's nested variable components, and all of them are variable, and each have their parameters. Some are very simple, some are hugely complex, and it's always the challenge to figure out the balance. But so here, but again, so you see here, so this element in its more basic form is, well, we should probably go to a new a bend axis, and a whole bunch of other things. I mean, so there's some the more primitive, like the so-called atomic elements are usually single shapes. It's like a stroke, or sometimes a stroke with two strokes together, or something that always appear together. So it's really that kind of design system. So that's kind of like so this exists in RoboCGK, and but given the amount of interpolation that's happening, the RoboCGK extension is kind of it's having a very hard time to display these things in real time. So kind of I started this project. So actually that's even though I'm showing some editing features now, it's not being used like that because it's not quite finished, but it is being used within Black Foundry as a previewer. So people can already proof their characters, their changes in almost real time. Well, they make maybe edits in the RoboCGK extension, and then later go to Fontra and check whether those changes indeed also, and then they can type a bit of text to see if it works in context. And share the URL. So that's the other thing that is nicely stolen from Google Maps. This URL that you see here is being updated with a slight delay. Which characters are here, where we are in the design space, how we are zoomed in. So that information is stored in the URL, and I can paste that in, and we'll take some loading, and there we are at the exact. So if someone finds a problem with a glyph here and there, they can just zoom in that particular spot, paste it in the Slack channel, and other people can verify, like, hey, what's going on there? So it's a real easy way, especially with these huge character sets. I mean, when I started being involved in this, I mean, there's the Chinese designers are used to identify the characters just by their Unicode character. They just type them, of course. Well, for me, I'm not fluent in that script. I can do know where to find it. Just quickly actually paste. So that's the nice thing about the web platform. You can just UI elements can also be copied and pasted. So let me paste here in the search. So I can search for a Unicode, for a typed Chinese character, and will find the glyph that belongs to that. But you know, when you're in font editing world, you need glyph names, and very regularly there was a problem. Like, hey, there's a problem with this glyph, and people would show screenshots with the Chinese character, and then I would have to ask, can you give me the glyph name, please? Because I have no quick way to find that thing. And now we can just paste the URL in the Slack channel and address the problem much faster. So that's been a pretty neat aspect. So at the same time, we were looking at this particular character. So I still want to go back to this particular spot here, because about the sharing. I mean, we can now. Let me see if it's. Am I in a? Oh, I'm not at the right place. Let's go back to default and actually here as well to make the effect a little clearer. So there's some lag now. This is a bit a dangerous part of the demonstration because it sometimes magically doesn't work because of network things, right? That's one of there's a famous list of fallacies of the network. Like one of the fallacies is the network is reliable, the network is fast. That none of those things are true. So, but here what we're looking at. So we are looking at data that's coming from a remote server. I'm looking at it at from two different windows. But we might as well pretend that that's a little bit difficult to demo. But this window could be totally on a and on like now. Yeah. Okay. So the school network. Things and not right. That's so yeah, this is already quite an overview of the kind of things that we can do, and if you now have questions, can it do this? Then probably the answer is no. But I see already a question, Colin. Yeah.
Will part of that be sort of hosting your own server like Black Foundry is now, or is Black Foundry going to be hosting a server for everybody?
Excellent question. And I think it's actually a good time. We have a few more bonus slides that will hand wave at those questions. So let's go to that. Let's see. So the second part of the slide. So there's the rest of the it's called future. So yeah, on we're coming to your question somewhat more. Not built in a way from the ground up in an extensible way, such in the way that RoboFont is. This is something that I envision as possibly a layer that will come later. And but anyway, we have at the moment you've seen the so-called Glyph Editor, even though you see a bit of text, so you can always edit just one glyph at a time. But what you did not see is a font overview, a grid view, or a spreadsheet view. You didn't see it because we don't have it. That could be a metrics kerning editor. There could be a design space editor. Certain things that are absolutely necessary for it to become useful in any serious way. And you can kind of say at the moment we like one gap. Sorry to still talk about things that we don't do. I mean, we should focus on the things that we do. But given the context of our CJK problems, text shaping and positioning is not a huge deal in many Eastern Asian scripts. So we currently do not have shaping, like how FontGoggles does that. We don't at the moment. The preview text. I hope it wasn't too obvious, but there's not even kerning at the moment. I mean, we can add kerning, but well, so that will be a big next thing, hopefully. So yeah, all kinds of possibilities. Maybe I should also. So yeah, here we're coming more in the context of what you were just asking. The way it is written, it can work in very many different kind of. Because it's later. I will not. This slide is dense on purpose because there's just a lot of stuff. And you know, once you start having these possibilities, like, oh, you could do this. Oh, wait, we can do it like that. So, for instance, it would potentially be possible to build it as a single desktop application, like in the form of an Electron app, like how Slack is an Electron app, how the GitHub desktop. There's a whole bunch of famous, I think, Microsoft Teams. Those are essentially web apps packaged to make them look like a desktop app, right? So that is a kind of a bloaty. That's kind of the Electron approach involves like pretty much embedding the core components of Chrome with it. So those applications are huge, but that's a way to make it really a downloadable app that anyone could use. So that's a direction that we're thinking we can go. We're researching peer-to-peer things. I mean, I can totally imagine if you're using a local version, looking at local data at your design space here, but you have your colleague on the other side of the world, like, hey, please, can you have a look? And you just kind of share a URL, and that with peer-to-peer connection, it would need a server to kind of negotiate a connection, but the real data could really be peer-to-peer. So someone could have a look at your font in real time, and you can have maybe a chat like, hey, what would you do in this? So it could be a critique kind of font with remote critiquing or collaboration, or like, hey, I'm having this font here, can you please draw? I'm having trouble with the German SZ. Can you just do that for me, or something like that? I don't know. So there are ways to do this technically on a relatively transparent. I mean, without it having to be a completely hosted kind of thing.
Yeah, and we just want to add that we don't want to open the MySQL server. We use it's just one instance of Fontra that's on there, but
No, but okay, scripting. Actually, I wanted to go to this. Okay, this slide is also relevant to your question. So potentially, it could develop into something like Google Docs for fonts. Then, indeed, yeah, someone will have to pay for that hosting, and that's not going to be us, right? So because that's a huge thing. So, but I mean, there's some hybrids possible. Like like I said, like if we also have a local application that people can download, potentially someone else could then log into that locally running thing, and maybe a foundry could have their own server and deploy it there if it's easy enough. And like the MySQL thing that Jérémie is mentioning, that's kind of almost a separate thing. It's all like in the block diagram. It's a fairly isolated thing. That. But yeah, we have good answers, except that at the moment still anything would be possible. So it's kind of curious to see what will happen, what people will ask for, and what they're willing to contribute. And because to some extent, I mean, that's an earlier slide. That's good. So one possible future. I mean, all the futures are not mutually exclusive, right? It could go. It could be either or anything. So at the moment, it's a hybrid application with a Python server and a JavaScript client that runs in the browser. But you know, there are JavaScript libraries out there that read TrueType fonts, that can parse them, can put them back together or something. So it would be possible to have an online application where you upload your TTF or something, or your UFO even. It really stays local to your browser. You edit, and then when you're done editing, you download it back. Could be the work still be hosted somewhere. That like the script code, the web pages could be hosted, but then it kind of works like a static websites, right? So that would be a more realistic thing that is hostable. Like the font editor called Fontra, which is already, I think, close to 10 years old. We looked at it, and it's unfortunately a bit obsolete and a little amateurish in many ways. But they made it already 10 years ago. It's pretty remarkable that it exists, and it's also open. You can look at the source. They kind of promised a new generation that I don't know if they're actually working on it, but they don't host in a live server. They have just that app that you can look at it in your browser, but everything you do in it is happening locally. They don't keep track of your data or something. They don't have to. So that is a much easier thing to host. But then the Google Docs like thing, yeah, that's a different thing. Would be interesting, but I doubt that Google itself would be interested. It's such a niche market that there would be some big convincing, like how to sell advertising to type designers to make this like, hey, I saw you edit that A. Are you interested in buying what? Yeah. So yeah, what time is it? Yeah, we're good into a discussion. Yeah, so configuration, did we cover the so yeah, the main takeaway here is, yeah, like we're kind of building it as kind of a successor or a hosting platform for a successor of RobotCGK, and the RobotCGK stuff is on the one hand quite specific, but on the other hand, and it just needs some more native support. Kind of what the main thing that we're missing in RoboFont is that this live interpolation thing. RoboFont is very much, okay, this is a very static source, and it's great for what that is, but that makes it difficult to build applications like RobotCGK on top of that. So that's why we're kind of looking in a different direction. Let's see, what other slides did we not talk about? Or because
currently you're at the concept of like master and branch, right?
No, yeah, we do not have that, but that's something that potentially possible, and it would be great to integrate that somehow, to have the GitHub or Git that you can kind of start working in a branch, and once you're done drawing that lowercase or that figure set, let's merge it back into the main stuff. So at the moment, there's two ways of thinking about that. On the one hand, we could think of it as a locally running application, and you you just work in a Git checkout. You have your sources in a repository, and you work on your local files, and therefore the whole Git applications can do the branching for you. That makes it as unfriendly as Git is, of course. So that's so indeed something like that, but in a more designer-friendly way would be fantastic. And when I think about the possibilities, I think yes, this would be. But it's pretty hard to come up with good UI to make it a reality. So yeah, it's something we keep in the back of our minds, but we have to first we have to produce some fonts. What else? Okay, yeah, that's the end of the slides, but we can is there more stuff that we can do that I didn't show?
Probably no, the undo related.
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit. So there's undo, and so there's this messaging system. Let's go back to the local version of this because it's a little bit more reliable. We don't need to. So the fact that this works is that this point is being edited, and it makes a little message like, hey, point with index such and such is moved to that location, and it sends that message to the server. And it also keeps track of like, okay, but previously that point was at this location. So, and it sends both things to the server, so the other side can respond to that, and vice versa. So this is a bidirectional, symmetrical kind of communication. So on the one hand, we have these messages that allow to synchronize two views on the same glyph, and that same message system is used to implement undo. So we we have the Command C and Shift C. So this is working on a per glyph thing. So that's the same mechanism, but one step further is to keep track of the history of all the edits and be able to go, let's have a look at the version from last week, right? So that's but that's the undo thing is now kind of modeled after Google Docs, actually. Like it's kind of local to your window and local to that, especially local to the user. So if we're, and you know, we have a bit of a multi-user thing with the MySQL server, but that is kind of coming now as part of that backend subsystem to make it sound very interesting. But Fontra itself still needs to grow more native multi-user stuff. So no, that's the thing. How this maybe how this developed. Late November or something. Well, we had the idea a bit earlier, like how we go, shall we try this? So, and then, okay, we weren't immediately convinced because we were thinking, okay, RoboFont has had a huge update, which drawing system, which is way faster. We were thinking, should we leverage that and go make a new RoboFont extension that uses those new things? Or yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of, and if cross-platformness is a high priority, and if we want to make a desktop application in a non-web thing, there's it's like Qt and WX widgets and you know, I have no experience with them, and every time I look at those things, I go a little bit because they will they look bad on every platform more or less. Is kind of what they have in common. So we were thinking, you know, web, hey, that's kind of a thing, right? The web, don't people use that for things and stuff? And you know, we tend to look down a little bit on websites and pages as oh, desktop is way superior. But you know, I'm not so sure anymore. And I think many apps on your phone are actually web apps that are just packaged as an app, right? I mean, they will just want the App Store and the Play Store to have these kind of physical things, but they're really, in many cases, just web apps. I mean, not always, of course. I mean, there's plenty of things you can do in a native iOS app that you can maybe not do on a web app. But your common little app that works on Android and iOS is typically a web app. Anyway, where was I going with this? So yeah, okay. So the history of like, so we were considering like, what shall we do? So we started. Okay, we kind of agreed that let's try this with the web. But I'm not a web developer, at least I. so we weren't really sure. Like, Jérémie has a bit more web background, and there's a good web developer employed by Black Foundry, so we had some knowledge and some support internally. But then I pretty much started it. This now from a proof of concept, and there's many in this thing where it's kind of still a proof of concept. So it can, as you see, it can already do a bunch of things, but so no, this will be the pen tool. Right, maybe next month or maybe in a couple of weeks, or it depends a bit. So there's perhaps we should, so this is initiated by Black Foundry, but it's more or less made possible by the work that Google Fonts. So it's kind of made in the context of some projects that are funded by Google Fonts. Can I say that? And that's more or less how it works, right? I mean, yeah, I rather said. No, I know I can say it, but I mean, is there a subtle way of how to phrase that? That's good. So, so now we have like some budget to work on this for in this year, but we'll have to see where the interest goes and whether funding will continue or whether there will be other projects under the context of which this can continue. So yeah, there's a big unknown future, but we're super excited where this is going. So that's why we took the chance and already show it to you, even though even though everything, the feature set will keep on growing. Time-wise, so we still have time. So more questions. Yes. I had at some point I made a little proof of concept demo where I had live stuff on an Android phone, an iPad, a Windows laptop, and an Apple laptop, and that kind of works. Details. The UI for a fun. We might have to rethink the UI more thoroughly. I have a little bit more hope that, especially like you see, I mean, that there's some details like how do pointer events work on a touch-based platform rather than a mouse-based medium. So there's all kinds of things where it almost kind of works, but there's nothing fundamental why it shouldn't.
Yeah, the page displays like
it's
smaller, and it's more difficult to interact with it because of the UI.
Yeah, I don't even own a tablet. I mean, I have a phone, but like the whole in my mind, with my background being 55 and all, I'm very much a desktop person. So how I think of making an application, this is still, even though I tried visually to indeed be informed by web apps and try to get to use. But still, I mean, yeah, once you, I mean, on touch devices, I mean, yeah, like a single tap to activate or I mean, there are plenty of keyboard things. I mean, I have like spacebar will get you a clean preview. I don't know. There's what other kinds of things. Right. It's fast.
But to load new parts, you need the command, and so you cannot do that on the phone, of course. But once it's loaded, you can.
Indeed, to really on the phone, no. But if the server process can be anywhere. That is currently the requirement, and that's a Python application. So the server needs a platform that can run a decent Python application. So that might not be an iPhone at this time. But yeah. Because that's with these CJK fonts, there are many characters. So to design and produce such a font, a variable font with a weight and optical size axis, requires relatively large teams to if you want to complete it within a reasonable, and still it's a lot of work. So so I can totally see that certain aspects of this editing, if you can do that on your average tablets. Huge benefits while being on the train, okay, let's fix this character here, right, real quick. Something like that. I mean, that's kind of what we're hoping for it to do. What other hidden things?
Yeah, because in this project, there is a part where we design the outlines, and another big part for CGK project where you just assemble the elements and move the sliders around to make them fit in the right shape. And this is design too, but a different kind of design.
Yeah, but the teams are specialized, right?
Yeah.
There are people who are more, there are people who make the atomic elements, like the variable strokes. And there are possibly other people, well, there tend to be more or less the same, right? The deep components, like the components that are made of components. And then there's other teams that can build the characters themselves from those components. So, and it's kind of a hierarchical and a way to kind of quite effectively. So almost impossible. Yeah.
Yeah.
More questions? Yes.
Are you picturing that there could be a way to use this tool to work with files that you're editing, that you are also editing RoboFont with?
Thank you for that question. We didn't pay that guy. But let's see, how can I do this? I'm here in my local host. Just a second. So I'm looking at Mutator sans. Oh, no, sorry. I'm not looking at Mutator. I will be looking at Mutator. So back to here, there's Mutator, Eric van Blokland's special demo font, ABC. So we're looking at this design space that's made out of a bunch of UFOs. So while at the moment we cannot even save back to the UFO yet, I mean, we see nice editing things, but vice versa. Okay, let's. This is the default master light condensed. Let's go here. Light condensed. Let's open that in RoboFont. So this is a different one. Okay, I had a similar demo this morning for font goggles, but. So here, back to Fontra. This is actually kind of, here we have some overlap with what font, also I'm editing in RoboFont. And when I save, Fontra will detect and will read it back in. I mean, you know, there is something, I mean, it's not, I mean, let's be completely honest. If I do this here, and now it doesn't go the other way yet. And if I edit this, this will just blindly overwrite what I did there. So but I mean, there's some communication possible. So that's what's indeed one of the things that demo and almost forgot about. Thank you. So yeah, more questions.
In the chat, but I think you already get the answer. The point is about what. So what are you using? Do you use JavaScript framework? And I think
that's a good question. Am I using JavaScript frameworks? Well, you know, part of the things that I set myself out to do in the context of this project is to learn JavaScript properly, right? So it was also educational for me, and to learn web technology, learn more CSS, learn more HTML, with the whole framework thing, and it's a really big world, and there's lots of super cool and useful stuff out there. Still, I decided, well, with agreement of Black Foundry and Jérémie, that I would focus on really the basic web technologies. At the moment, there are no external dependencies in terms of the JavaScript front end. So there will, I mean, for instance, one of the things that I will need at some point is to do Bezier manipulation and intersection and stuff. There's a great library from Pomax, the Lib Bezier or something, or Bezier.js. That's definitely a thing that I'm going to incorporate. And from that point on, if there's a library on NPM that we can use, it will be used. But so I'm starting to I'm now confident enough that I kind of know how this works. You know, the thing with frameworks is, I mean, it's super great that stuff exists, but they come with their own implementation details, and you don't know how efficient they may be or how well they will scale. So by sticking really to the bare metal JavaScript, as it were, I have full control over, and I can see how it performs. If it performs poorly, I will know that, and you know, whatever it performs poorly will be my mistake, right? So whereas if you're using a framework, I mean, there's plenty of 2D graphics frameworks out there that you can use. Like there's, well, P5.js is more like the generative art kind of thing, but we kind of looked at that a little bit, because those, in fact, there's a whole bunch of libraries in that category that offer more higher level abstractions to draw 2D things. So that might have, so still, we kind of evaluated those options. Going to go for now. Just, you know, actually not all that bad. It's not even that low, and it's direct, super. I don't know how well it come across Zoom. You'll now get a peek of how the server process is started. I will go switch to a different folder, and I have here, which one can I show? Yeah, this is a, was it this one? Yeah, this is a font by Arthur Reinders Volmer, who is color fonts, but is also famous for his unicorn fonts. And I will pick, I found this is a font. This is the W graph glyph from that font. It's not even a color font, but he drew this meticulously. I checked, this is the glyph within this font with the largest amount of nodes, and it's about 7,000 nodes, and we can still zoom in, and we can still select, and can still move around, and I can still undo, and well, that's for a simple little web app. That's like, even, I mean, now if I zoom out a bit, there's lots of nodes in view. It gets a little sluggish, but it's still possible to do stuff and to do undo. I mean, it's like there's, let's see how far we can zoom. There's not really, well, there is a limit to how far you can zoom. Oh, there's some artifact here. There's it's not really behaving great, but I mean, let's go. Okay, that's 1 unit in font space. That's how far I'm zoomed in now. So. The last Boolean operations, I would say yes, although initially I might be dependent on the server process, but the second part of the question I didn't quite get. What? Oh. Layered. The best way to what? Yeah, I don't have no good answer to that. So no, it's, you know, in many ways it's a very traditional font editor that you just, yeah, you have your outlines, you have your nodes. So it's at the moment not pretending to offer apart from the variable component stuff, which is really core to the concept and how everything can work, that design spaces can be local to a glyph. So that's an important difference to other things, but like more stroked-based design options, we currently do not have and do not pretend to want to make. I mean, I know it's a very fascinating subject to come up with other ways to draw shapes, strokes, etc. And maybe this will be an environment where other people can experiment with those things. At the moment, we're thing has to just do the basics first, and that's where we're at now. So yeah, Nina.
Able to get all of that into architecture, or is that like
that's, you know, yes and no. Black Foundry developed a kind of a custom file format or more or less a folder structure for CJK projects that use this, where all that variable stuff, axes and stuff, is defined in lib data. I mean, the glyph data within that kind of other folder structure is still glyph files as how you find them in the UFO, but it kind of got rid of the overall UFO structure. It kept the glyph files, but adds all that additional stuff and just puts in lib data. So we currently Fontra does not have its own file format. It might, I mean, it has its own internal data structure that would be very easy to serialize in as a JSON file or several JSON files. So maybe there will be something that is not UFO, but but to write these things to a UFO, we will have to use custom lib keys there. That's I mean, there's some, I chatted yesterday, and it would be nice in UFO if we could store custom custom data on a per component basis, that those slider things. What happened? My screen is gone. Someone unshared my screen. There's some hooliganism going on, or what? Moderators, help me! Should I reshare my screen, or what's? I mean, someone broke in. The ghost of Cooper. Okay, well, it's trying to connect. We're back at my yeah. Anyway, what more online questions?
For the backend, does Python have a good performance? Have you tried any languages like C++ or
Python has excellent performance. C++ is out of the question for me. I mean, that's Rust. I know of. I'm not a Rust programmer. I know people who do that. It's an excellent language to implement really fast libraries and stuff. So far, our server process is not a bottleneck, so it's not something that has a priority for us to make faster. It's always an interesting question. Rust has a lot of traction. Has lots of interest because it's kind of a better C++, but still, it's a systems programming language. I mean, I'm originally just a simple type designer and computer nerd, and on my own learned to program. So languages like Python are excellent for me. Because you can just start by messing around and just until something maybe works. And you know, over the past 3 decades, I got relatively good at it. But still, that's my background, and I'm very aware of that. So to program in C++ or Rust, you need just a lot more effort to get an idea across. I mean, for Python, you can just sketch something out, you can improve it, and you can build solid libraries. It's a very different approach. And you know, if there are some components where there will be no, I have how much time? Oh, we're over time. We're over time. Thank you. Done.
Yeah, the ghost was telling you to.
The ghost was telling me to stop. So I will stop share. And thank you for your attention.